We are recording. Recording. We are recording.
5, 4, 3, 2. Brady's looking at me weird. 3, 2, 1. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to our very first podcast edition of Behind the Gamer Tags, our first interview series that steps away from what we normally do and enter the Gamer Actual, something a little different away from Gamer Interrupted and things like that. That tonight we'll be not talking about the news. Instead, we will have an interview series. It's a little bit more emotional, a little bit more raw, a little bit more serious. There will be no jokes. Well, a little bit of jokes, but there
I
will
was
be
gonna
no
say.
intended jokes. And with me tonight, I have with me Doc Shippey. But tonight he's not with me as Doc Shippey, just like I'm not with you tonight as AJ East Coast. Tonight I'm interviewing tonight as Austin. And I say that seriously because most of you don't know my real name. And tonight I'm not interviewing Doc Shippey. I'm interviewing Dan, the man behind ETG, behind everything that we do here at Enter the Gamer Actual. How you doing tonight, Dan?
I'm pretty good. Let's see. Doc Shippey, Gamer Actual. What other taglines do I have on there?
So we've talked on our stream before that the Doc Shippey and the AJ East Coast are more of just a extension of our personalities. So could you explain a little bit how it's a little different tonight from what viewers and listeners are usually used to?
So when we stream, and I'm streaming as Doc Shippey, I typically am a little bit more animated than I normally am. A little bit more outgoing, a little bit more in your face about certain topics like Kathleen Kennedy and EA and all the goofy topics that I'm very quick to blast about on our Facebook as Gamer Actual or as Doc Shippey on the salt mines or any of the other things we stream on. So this is going to be a little bit more honest, if you will, because you get to see me as me and you as you.
Well, we're definitely looking forward to it. I think we should just hop right in. The first question I have for you tonight, Dan,
Yeah, what's up?
is so where are you from originally, and what part of the country do you normally represent?
As if we upload this to YouTube, y'all can see my Boston Bruins T-shirt I'm wearing right now. I'm originally from Connecticut, born and raised, went to college out there, did most of my youth out there, correction, all of it. So I kind of represent with New England as a whole because I bounced around. We would travel to Vermont, New Hampshire for family trips, would spend as much time in Massachusetts as I could, hung out in Rhode Island briefly when I had to stop on my way up to Massachusetts.
Some people say that there's some you grow up with a little bit different values when you grow up in New England. There's a certain
Yeah.
set of New England values. Do you are there any of those that you hold or anything that you try to practice from New England that you learned growing up? Because it
Duncan
is a
is
very
law.
different area. What was that? Sorry.
Duncan is law.
Dunkin' is law.
Dunkin'
Yes.
Donuts. Yep. I mean, it's to be honest, it's no different than growing up down here. It's just every place has its own little quirks. For those playing at home, I am currently in North Carolina, so a little bit of a culture shock from New England.
So you mentioned that you went to college. Which college did you attend?
University of Hartford in West Hartford, Connecticut.
West Hartford, Connecticut.
Yup.
Nice, nice. And what was your major at the time that you studied?
I had a I have a bachelor's in arts and communications, emphasis in broadcasting and journalism.
So did you start originally with just the major, or did the emphasis start from the beginning, or was there anywhere in there that you had to declare an emphasis or anything like that?
When you go into communications, you typically pick your emphasis so you know kind of what you're going to into. For me, I originally started out as a broadcasting major, or as they changed it, but right before I graduated, mass media. So I was a comm major with an emphasis on mass media, and then I did a double emphasis towards the end of my college career. I think it was my junior. I took up journalism as my second emphasis.
So what was it that kind of lit the fire for you to declare that as your major when you went to college? Was there, did you do something special in high school? Was there any extracurricular activities outside that you participated in that kind of made you kind of do some Stranger Things AV Club style?
Actually, no. Growing up, I've always been super creative. My mom always used to bust my ass because I would love telling stories. I would be sitting there drawing comics and doing very creative things. I did musical theater for 7 years when I was younger, starting when I was in elementary school, if I remember correctly, all the way up through my high school. And
Wow, that's something I have to ask about that real quick. What kind of, so were you said you're doing musical theater. Were you like doing
yep,
like singing and dancing? Were
yep.
you
I,
doing,
I, I
yeah?
was singing and dancing. I was
What kind of shows? Which shows did you put on?
let's see. We did Grease, we did Oklahoma, we did a bunch of like B plays, like a lot of off Broadway stuff that really nobody knows about.
Okay.
I stopped my sophomore year of high school and of doing the on stage aspect of it, and instead went into more of the lighting, audio end of it, doing tech stuff.
The theater tech side of the house.
Yep.
Did they have a club or anything like that that you were part of, or was just kind of, did you just kind of take interest in it and start
It was
learning?
more of an extracurricular type of thing
Hmm.
that we did with the plays. I didn't really do anything other than that with my with tech and working behind the scenes. I shot videos with my buddies when I was younger, and that was pretty much it.
So do you think that that's what led you to want to pursue more of a production thing in college, or at least go
Uh,
into communications?
so I always loved TV. When I was younger. I auditioned for a couple movies, but it didn't really go anywhere. And then when I was hanging out with a couple friends of mine, they introduced me to Clerks by Kevin Smith.
Okay.
And that for me was really a turning point because after seeing that movie and how it was a very dialogue driven movie. There was not a lot of action in it, but I was so captivated by it that it made me want to go into making movies and making me want to tell stories that people want to watch. And I really liked how it was very homegrown. The story was some dude that worked in a freaking uh, gas station kind of deal, a quick stop, if you will. And it was just all that was his day. It was a day in the life of this dude who works at a grocery store type of thing. And it was one of those stories that it had moments of pure nonsensical laugh, non sequitur craziness, but then it would be very down to earth and very close to home, and you'd be like, huh. And I really liked that style of storytelling. Kevin Smith for me was really my inspiration to go into media, and I haven't really looked back since.
Did you kind of see yourself in the movie at all? Like, was it kind of a little bit of representation of your life at all?
No, I actually saw myself more as the writer, and it was one of those things like if Kevin Smith could sit there with his buddies and write this movie where all his friends play a role that's almost a little bit autobiographical in a Twilight Zone-ish kind of way, I thought, shit, I could do this, and that's kind of been my momentum doing anything I'm doing is like, shit, I could do that.
So you go to the university. What was it? You said Connecticut or Western
University
Connecticut?
of Hartford in West
Hartford,
Hartford. Yeah.
West Hartford. So University of Hartford, and you're doing communications. Tell us about some of your first classes that you took. Was it kind of easy to smooth into? Was it difficult?
College was, well, I've always been a bit of a procrastinator, so college was a bit of a wake up call for me. A
Hmm.
lot of my earlier classes when I first got there were very phone it in from home type of deal. Uh, I really wish that I had put a little bit more effort into my studies, but I was there for more of the experience. I did a lot of, as the Navy likes to call it, collaterals, though. I did a lot of clubs. I was in the student TV network. I was in the student newspaper. I helped out with the student, what was it, the student ministry a little bit. And then I did stuff with the a group called Spectrum that was the Gay Lesbian Alliance at the time.
Okay. So it seems like you were very diverse and you try to keep a lot of your extracurriculars open-minded and different things like that.
Yep.
Were there any other like organizations or things like that you were a part of that kind of led to where you are, like a little bit added to
Well,
the college experience?
I rushed Sigma Nu International Fraternity my freshman year. After a bunch of my buddies had told me, had been like, "Hey, dude, you should probably, you should, rush these guys. These guys are pretty cool." And I haven't really looked back since. It
So
was
you
one of
rushed
the
as a sophomore,
freshmen,
as a freshman?
second
Okay.
half my freshman year, and it was one of the most amazing and rewarding experiences I've had. And it was great because on my campus, my fraternity was kind of the go-to guys.
Mhm.
You
How
needed
many fraternities were on campus at the time?
crap. I would be remiss, or I would be. My memory is not what it used to be, and I would be wrong to try to list them all off because I
Hmm.
would most definitely leave one or two of them out. But there was at least six or
At
seven
least
of
six or
them.
seven.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, because from
Um,
what I understand, the Connecticut colleges, they can seem to be a little big, but they're not as big when it comes to, in
yeah.
comparison to the other universities in the country.
Yeah.
But did you
It
kind
was
of have
smaller. It
a
was nice.
did you have like kind of the traditional movie experience with parties and, throwing down all the time, or was it a little bit more different with your fraternity experience?
I mean, we knew how to party. I mean, we definitely threw down with the best of them, but at the same time, we also did a lot of the stuff on campus. Like, one of the brothers was the head of the student council. Another one of the brothers was, or several of the brothers were on the TV station. Several of the brothers were on the radio station. Several of the brothers were in the different honor societies. Some of them were doing. We were a very diverse group, and there really wasn't a single stereotype among us of
Hmm.
the what type of fraternity we were. A lot of times they would refer to us as Sigma Nerd because we did everything,
Sigma
and
nerd.
a lot of our guys were on the honor roll, and like I said, a lot of them were in the honor societies. So, with a diverse group like that, you don't really have kind of that type of stereotype with it. It didn't really have a niche we fell into. We were just all over the place, and that's one of the main reasons why I rushed them is because of how diverse they were and just how the type of people that were in it were very welcoming. They were very goofy, and it was a non-hazing fraternity, which was also nice. But a lot of people hear that and it's like, oh, you didn't really get the fraternity experience. It was a lot different because it
Hmm.
was non-hazing. Instead of if you messed up, you just got beat or hazed for it. If you messed up, it was all about accountability. It was on you, and
Right. Holding
you
you responsible for your actions.
exactly. And if you messed up, that could mean, hey, next round of cuts, you might get dropped. And
Right.
I remember being terrified of that because, of everything we went through and all the stuff we did as a group to get to where we wanted to be. Just that thought of the brothers being like, yeah, no, we don't want you in here was terrifying.
Well, you mentioned some of your brothers like going in like student government and the TV club and all those other things. Were you able to hop in and out of any of those things or do some shadowing at any of
Oh,
those
yeah.
different things? Or
Very much so. Because of that, I ended up in as the layout editor of the student newspaper while I was a sophomore, and then as a junior, I became the managing editor of the school paper. And then the second half of my sophomore year, I had to give that up because I was also working at ESPN part time, and I couldn't balance both of those two things up.
so working at the school newspaper was kind of your first jump into journalism.
Yes.
Okay. Was there any at the time? Was there any like films or games or anything, movies, stuff like that that kind of lit a fire for you? Like any books or stuff like that kind of lit a fire for you to kind of want to pursue journalism more than just a hobby at this point? Because it seems like at this time of your life you doing all these things, but they're all kind of circulating and circumnavigating back to journalism production, things like that.
So I was, like I said, around my junior year, I took on the double emphasis of mass media and journalism, and that was because I took the first half. I took a creative nonfiction class, and it was in that creative nonfiction class where I read two books that influenced uh, me as a creator, and that was On the Road by Jack Kerouac and Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas by Hunter S. Thompson. On the Road by Jack Kerouac was very interesting, and I always describe it to people as it's a rich piece of tiramisu because it's very difficult to get through, but it's very rich, and you can only really read a page or two before you're like, all right, I need to set this down. That was a lot of information to digest. Uh, Jack Kerouac has a very good way of descriptions. He's very poetic in the way he writes, and the thing that kind of rocks me about the whole thing is it reads like fiction, but it's
Hmm.
actually based on fact. All the characters are based on him and his friends, and all of the events that happened actually happened. And so for me, reading that was just like, oh snap, this is different. I'm not really sure what to do with this. And then the one-two punch immediately after that, they had us read Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas, and the fact that whereas most journalism looks at the world from the outside in, Fear and Loathing was a journalistic piece that was like, screw that. I want to be involved in this story. I want to be a part of it.
It's crazy that you mentioned Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas because this is not the first time that I've heard from other people that study and that are involved in journalism and work in the journalism media that is a kind of a fire spark, if you will, for them. That book, like, what is it particularly about it that kind of just draws so many journalists to, I want to say, have a slight obsession with it almost?
It's it's a shotgun blast.
Hmm.
It's just pure chaos. But it's very honest about what it's doing, and there are times, it's everybody looks at it as this giant drug binge that these two went on in Las Vegas, but they forget the reason why they were there and the story itself that surrounds these two. And if you look at what was going on at the times, Hunter Thompson went to with his lawyer, quote unquote, Oscar Acosta, who was very big in the Brown Power movement at the time. And Hunter Thompson was tasked by Sports Illustrated, if I'm correct, to go and cover this motorcycle race in Las Vegas. And he and his lawyer buddy decided to go and make this the pursuit of the American dream in a place where, the roads are supposedly paved in gold and the
Anything
city,
is possible.
anything is possible. And it gives you a really just dark look at a dark and honest look at Las Vegas as a whole. And for me, that was like, oh wow, like he's telling the story. He's part of this story. It's not, you know, a narrative from somebody sitting outside watching the two of them stumble their way through Las Vegas, going into Circus and trying to buy a monkey from somebody. It was more honest. It was literally him telling you everything that happened. And one of the things that made it so great is he recorded everything. He had a tape recorder where he would sit there recording, and then after or the next day he'd sit there and listen to these recordings back and be like, "Oh shit, so that happened." And then he'd type that out and in his own Hunter S. Thompsonish way of writing.
Wow. So really that was just really the do you hold Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas as the be all end all from what your start of that style of journalism came from then?
For me, yes. It was
Okay.
super influential for me, and that was when I truly decided to be go down the journalism path. After reading that book,
And at
and what was that?
and at that point you said that you were doing some stuff at ESPN. So you had a internship at ESPN or was it part
I
of a
was working
class
part
or
time, so I had originally
a
set
full
out.
job?
Yeah, I had originally set out to go intern at ESPN. It was the summer of my sophomore year, if I'm correct, going into my junior year, and my mom had been harping on me. She was like, "Hey, you need to go get an internship, because that's what you're supposed to do. You're supposed to get an internship, so that way you have job experience. So when you go out into the real world, you're not, screwed over by people who have job experience." And I'm like, "All right, cool." So I started
Did you
applying.
choose ESPN because of your kind of your background behind like loving the Bruins and the Red Sox and the
So
Patriots and
to
things
be
like that?
honest, I became a Bruins fan in college after the Whalers left us to come down here to North Carolina to become
Right.
that bastardization known as the Hurricanes. The
Hurricanes.
whale is and forever will be in every nutmegger's heart. But So I was never much of a sports fan besides hockey
Hmm.
growing up. My parents tried to get me into basketball, soccer, football. My dad was a big football, baseball fan, and it never really clicked with me. I was never sports bored me. There wasn't
Sports
enough
ball
going
was not
on.
your thing.
Yeah, sports ball was not my thing. And the reason why I liked hockey is because there was so much going on at any one time that even little ADHD me could pay attention. Because, hey, maybe a fight will break out. Hey, that dude just got checked into the boards. Holy cow. You never know what's
Yeah.
going to happen in a hockey match. And that really is what kept my interest in it. But no, I never really wanted to work at ESPN. And for me, it was more of a means to an end. I had been applying to places like Discovery and NBC and ABC and Fox, just so I could go do news stuff and be in the field and technical direct and all that shit. So that way I didn't have to go work at ESPN. And then and then one day ESPN was having a job fair, and my mom was like, "Just go and see what you can get," because
See what
obviously,
happens.
yeah, obviously these other places aren't doing it. And I was like, "All right, fine." So
What
walked
position did you apply for?
I applied to be an intern.
Just an intern. Yeah.
Yeah. So I applied to be an intern, and then I was in the middle of class. I got a phone call from the head of internships, and I missed it because I was in class. And then I heard the voicemail. I was like, "Oh crap!" And I called them back, and no answer. I kept calling them back for the next month, no answer. And I was like, "All right, fine. I guess nothing's gonna come from this." And then about 3 months later, I got a phone call again from the head of hiring, and or the head of HR. That was like, "Hey, how would you rather a part-time job?" And I was like,
Hmm.
"Ooh, well, okay then."
And was this for the same duties and responsibilities or
Pretty much,
something
yeah.
same? Yeah. What were some? So when you finally got the part-time position, what were some of your first like introductory responsibilities? Was it grabbing the coffee for Joe? Was it kind of printing out the reports for the day? What kind of things were you doing?
I was working camera and doing audio.
Okay, so
Uh,
that's a little different.
I was working camera and doing audio for domestic productions at ESPN for my first 6 months there. I did all of the studio shows. What was it? Sports Center, First and 10, NFL Countdowns, NBA Wraps, all of those big name sports shows. I was working camera or doing audio or learning video for or doing records for.
Wow, so you got some real world hands-on experience because I mean ESPN is a huge company, and
Yeah.
what were there any kind of negativity though working at the ESPN? Was it anything
Oh,
difficult?
it was a very toxic environment. And for somebody who was trying to just graduate school and didn't really want to be there in the first place, uh,
Hmm.
it was, I kind of got eaten alive there. So, but in ESPN's defense, they gave me every chance in the world. And they even hired me full time after 2 years. And just, I wasn't very appreciative of it. I felt that it wasn't for me, and it really wasn't. Like I said, you know me well enough to know that I'm not a sports fan. I don't
Yeah.
like. I'm not big into big egos and whatnot, and all that. That's all that was big egos and sports and talking about sports and stats. And I was just like, dude, this is boring. I don't want to be here. I
So
don't think I really appreciated what I had when I was working there, though. I mean, it was a very good position, and I probably could have looked for something else elsewhere while I was working there. But
where you
I,
say that maybe you weren't ready at the time and you kind of
oh
jumped
yeah,
right into something that you weren't prepared for.
very much so.
But you had already finished school by the time that you were working at ESPN. Were you still in school?
I was still in school when I started working at ESPN. I was working the entirety of my senior year. Uh, yeah, I was part time my entire senior year at ESPN and trying to graduate, which is where a lot of the issues I had came from when I was working
Hmm.
there. Because they would be trying to get me to do stuff, and I'm sitting there studying for an exam, and they're like, "Dude, you need to pay attention." I'm like, "I have finals tomorrow."
trying to manage multiple things at once that are huge, career riveting
And
things.
that got me into a lot of trouble there. I had a lot of missed cues. I had, I was late a couple times because class didn't get out late until late,
Right.
and then I was always in trouble for stuff like that at the start. And then after they hired me full time, that kind of shadow or the mark that I had made kind of followed me when I went to ESPN News and was working there full time. And I just, I kind of got eaten alive there. I had a supervisor that was new that just wanted to get rid of me, and I kind of fell into the traps he had laid. So, but I don't blame him for it. I was a shit employee. I
Hmm.
was very angry. I was just, again, very unappreciative of being there and just kind of couldn't leave the frat house behind me, so to speak.
Well, I was gonna. My next question was there anything in Sigma Nu and your experiences in college that you attested that you kind of took with you for the rest of your life, or at least brought in with you to ESPN and to that full time position and things like that?
No, and I kind of wish I had because
Hmm.
had I had actually appreciated it a little bit more and held myself to the standards that I did when I was in the fraternity, I probably would still be there right now. But at the same
Hmm.
time, I think ESPN firing me was one of the best things to have happened to me.
How do you mean?
I would still be there right now, and ETG
Just
wouldn't
not
have.
happy and
I would have
right.
been. I'd probably, knowing me, I would have been. I would be overweight. I would be probably divorced twice by now. I would just be hating life, not happy, working a job I don't like. I probably would have been fired by at this point, and then I don't. It's hard to say where I would have been. This is going back almost 10 years.
Well, while you're working there, you mentioned that you weren't having a good time, that it was, hard for you and things were rough and things like that. But what kind of things were you doing in your off time to kind of counter that, kind of, spark some enjoyment or at least some things like that in your life?
So me and a couple of buddies of mine had started a small web comic called Epic Fail Comics, and we had made a small company known as Wet Your Pants Entertainment.
I love that. What's your pants entertainment?
Wet Your Pants Entertainment, or WIPE for short, WIPE. And we had had a decent run. We had had 8 solid comics, and then we kind of just fell off. I was the only one who really wanted to keep it going. I was still working on new comics, and my buddies were mainly just using our weekly meetings as gaming time. Like, hey, we're all together, let's game, and they would use it under the guise of doing research.
Well, what kind could you explain a little bit further, like what a web comic is? Like, what kind of things were you doing with the comic? Were you also, what were your responsibilities? Were you writing, drawing, producing it?
So we didn't really have defined terms what we were doing back then. A webcomic is, for those of you who are familiar with the app Webtoons, it's kind of similar to that. You do a weekly upload of a single panel of a comic, like a comic book page, if you will.
Hmm.
Like the old graphic novels, it was just a page that you'd put up. Typically, it was about 3 to 7 cells of drawings, and it would tell a short story, and that would be it. And it was me and 3 of my buddies. We all would come up with the different story arcs. I was the artist. My buddies Hayden and Andrew were inker and colorer, and my buddy Seth was the one who was supposed to upload it. But we all kind of fought over who did what, and nobody really know what the defined terms were, and it just kind of ended up falling through, which is a shame because we had a lot of fun doing it. We had, like I said, 8 solid comics, a couple of which I'd love to make into shorts at some point, but maybe in the
What was the
future.
theme of the comic book? Was it like detective stories, your typical superhero stuff? What was going on? What was the themes of those?
It was 4 gamers that lived together. It was kind of like Big Bang Theory before Big Bang Theory. It was
Okay.
4 archetypal gamers that lived together and their nonsensical adventures.
What were the names of the four gamers?
So there was Carpo, who was my buddy Hayden, he was the Nintendo platformer gamer, and he was the most normal out of everybody in the house. And then there was Zero, who was my character, who was the drunken, angry first person shooter, Xbox Live type of gamer.
Yelling all over the
Oh,
place.
yelling, racing games. And the other joke we had with him is he could not understand card games. So they would be
Okay.
playing Magic, and he would just be like, They're like, all right, I play a Raging Goblin. Zero, your turn. And he'd be like, I play my library card. And they'd be like, no, let me see your hand. You have 5 Yu-Gi-Oh cards in here. Yes. And
Yes.
that was the running joke of his character is he could not do card games, and that's kind of the joke with me and my buddies back then is I was more of a video gamer and they were all more of the tabletop card gamer, and it's kind of funny because now I'm more of the tabletop card gamer and I don't play as many video games as I would like.
So at this point, you guys are doing the webcomic. What kind of led to the, no longer doing the webcomic? And was it kind of just moving on from other things, or just kind of phased out, or?
It just kind of phased out. We all ended up getting busy with other things. One of my buddies ended up moving across the country. The other ones didn't want to do it anymore. Jobs got in the way, and it just kind of fell through.
Mhm. Is this something that you would be interested in ever bringing back, or possibly?
I mean, I wouldn't rule it out for ETG Actual in the future. I would love to have a comics page back on, especially under the Enter the Gamer umbrella. I think that would be awesome. But as of right now, with the time constraints and manpower issues we have, I would say
Mhm.
it's kind of out of our realm of possibility for the moment.
More of kind of a passion project to table for the future?
Exactly.
Yeah. So you mentioned before that you were actually let go from ESPN. Tell us a little bit about that time. Like, what was going on? What led to being let go? Because it's not a mystery to listeners that you ended up joining the military. Just like we always say, that Enter the Gamer is always a veteran and active and run
Hmm.
military affiliated things. And we have a lot of people that have worked with us in the past that are veterans and things like that,
Yep.
including myself. So what led to, going into the recruiting office and wanting to join the military
So I had done kind of like junior ROTC when I was younger. I did the Air Force
in
has
high
a
school,
program. Yeah, in middle school actually. The Air
middle school?
Force has a program called the Civil Air Patrol, and I did that 6th and 7th grade, and then that kind of I lost interest in it. I wasn't really giving two fucks about it, but it kind of gave me that whole military bug.
Hmm.
I thrive in structure and in chaos for some reason. So, and the military's got both of that. You have, it's very rigid in some aspects, but then it's just pure chaos everywhere else. And that's just part of the American military doctrine is we don't know what the hell we're doing, which is half the fun of it. So when I was just kind of in a downward spiral at ESPN, they had put me into editing, and I don't know sports. So they would be like, hey, we need this highlight reel cut really quick. And I'm like, I don't know where to start. They're
Right.
like, oh, just get it from the beginning of the play. And then I'm sitting there, I'm like, what's the beginning of the play?
Well, where's
Like,
the
shit,
beginning?
yeah,
Right.
where's the beginning? Oh, it's when he gets passed. It got passed like 5 times. What are you talking about? And so, like in football, they'd be like, "Oh yeah, it's from the snatch," and I'd be like, "Okay, cool," and I'd cut it from the snatch. They'd be like, "No, no, no, you cut it too long," and I'm like, "I did exactly what you. Well, you're supposed to make a judgment call. If it's too long, cut it from the beginning of that play." I'm like, it's like trying to describe the color red to somebody who's blind. You know,
Right.
uh, you can say, "Oh yeah, it's the color of stop signs." I've heard of stop
Mm,
signs. I
Ooh, I don't
don't
know
know
what
what
it
that
actually looks
is.
like. Right.
I can't visualize it. Oh, it's the color of a fire truck. Okay, cool. I've heard of fire trucks. I don't know what you mean. It's cinnamon. It's red. Is you can't connect to that, and that's
So
kind
that
of
you knew sports, but at the same time you didn't know no sports, and
yeah.
especially what they were looking for.
Sports ball. I knew sports ball. That's an athlete, and he's playing football. Did I get it
Right.
right? Dan, they're playing baseball. Damn it.
So kind of at what point then, what led you to walking into the recruiting office?
So I had intended to try to go officer while I was working at ESPN, and then they gave me an offer I couldn't refuse. They had me go full time, and I stayed on, and that kind of shuffled the officer thing under the rug. And then after they canned me, I was sitting there thinking about it. I was working in retail at the time, and I had kind of stagnated. And I was working at one of the best retail chains and one of the best jobs. It's always in the Forbes Fortune 500, Nordstrom's, which is a great company, and I really appreciate everything they did for me there. And it kind of got me back on my feet, but I didn't really want to stay there. I didn't see myself there 10 years down the road.
Hmm.
And I wanted to do something else with myself. So I had been thinking about joining the military for a while, and it was my buddy Emil that finally said, "Dude, just fucking do it. Just fucking enlist.
Right.
You don't know what you're doing yet. You're working in retail. You said you'd never go back to retail. Nobody's hiring you in communications right now. It was right when the recession hit, so nobody was hiring. In fact, everybody was letting people go. So I was just kind of in between a rock and a hard place, and I was like, you know what? Enlisting kind of makes sense.
What kind of made you want to forego the officer route? Because you still had the opportunity to. Was it kind of
I
just
just wanted to get up and go, and the
right?
officer program was one of those where I probably would have had to sit in purgatory for a little bit longer, take more tests, do some drilling, and then from what one of my recruiters was saying, my GPA had kind of fallen off towards the end, and they wanted me to take a couple more classes. And I wasn't ready to go back to school again to raise my GPA just so I could get into the programs that I wanted. So I was like, screw it, I'm just going to enlist.
So it led you to choose the medical path.
Again, a bunch of my Marine buddies were sitting there one day and they were like, hey, what are you thinking about doing? And I was like, well, my parents were both ex cops, so I might as well just go be a master at arms, which is the Navy's version of being a police officer. And they were like, no, 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 dude, if you're going to go do anything, go be a freaking doc. Go be a corpsman. You don't want to be a little nappy pampy sailor man. Just go be a badass. Go be a corpsman. And I was like, oh, that does sound kind of cool. He's like, yeah, Marines love you. Your enemies hate you. And what better job to have? And I was like, that's okay. That sounds pretty cool. So I went to the recruiters and I told them I want to be a corpsman. They're like, okay, cool, but we have nuke programs. I'm like, don't offer me nuke again. I don't like doing
Yeah.
math. I don't want to
What
be
is
on a
nuke?
carrier.
What does nuke mean for
Uh,
people that don't
for
know?
for those of you playing at home, a nuke is somebody who works on the nuclear reactors or in the aircraft carriers or nuclear powered subs, monitoring the reactors and doing engineering on the reactors and all that type of stuff. So you usually have to be pretty smart to do that shit. And I tested pretty high in my ASVAB, and I was just like, yeah, no, no,
Just don't want to do it. Yeah.
nope, not for me. And so they offered me corpsman and MA and a couple other jobs, but I was like, I'll just be corpsman. That's all the Marines are telling me to do it. All my buddies are telling me to do it. Might as well just go corpsman. And it turns out when I was talking to my mom about it, she told me that my grandfather had been a corpsman on the USS Randolph back in the 4 years between Vietnam and Korea. So
Okay.
it was kind of like keeping the family tradition alive. So I thought that was kind of cool.
So you joined the Navy. You was it a kind of like a hard shift for you from being like a college guy and working at ESPN and things like that to kind of shifting into
So
this more severe structured environment?
having rushed the fraternity, it was uh, when you were rushing in your fraternity, you get used to that kind of structure. There's a
Hmm.
hierarchy, and you just get used to learning the hierarchy. And I had done junior military, like I had said, when I was in middle school, so I kind of had that
Kind of
mentality
used to
going
it.
into it. I kind of knew what I was going into. Um, Boot camp kicked my ass, but it kicks everybody's ass. But it
Right.
wasn't as much of a shell shock as a lot of other people get. But marching is the only thing I still can't do.
Don't worry.
But I think that's
Walking
a
in
Navy
place is a
thing.
lot harder than it sounds.
I think that's just a Navy thing. We can't march for shit.
Much as they really want you to,
As much as
it
they
is
try, we
difficult.
just can't do it.
So what kind of things were you doing in your off time when you weren't, at work? Were you playing games a lot? What was leading you to I guess the question I'm kind of going towards, what was leading towards the inception of ETG?
So I had tried getting the webcomic started again when I was stationed at my first duty station. I was at a shore duty command, and for those who don't know what that is, that's when you're not in a deployable unit, you're not going anywhere for at least 3 years, and
Kind of taking care of things at
yeah,
home.
you're just taking care of things at home. I was working at a clinic in South Texas, so not a whole lot of shit going on. So
Right.
I was working there, and I started getting back into the swing of doing comics again. And I had called one of my buddies. I was like, "Hey, why don't we do a web comic again?" And he was like, "Yeah, cool, that'd be fun." So we started doing it again, and Wet Your Pants Entertainment got a second life, and it lasted all of 3 to 4 months, and then it disappeared.
Okay.
And that was it. It was just
Kind of the same usual being phased out and
yeah,
things like
it
that.
phased out. Again, I was the only one who really wanted to do work on it. My buddy had life happened, and he ended up just kind of doing his own thing. I don't really fault either of us for the death of it. It's just one of those things it wasn't meant to be at the time. And then I ended up
Right.
getting deployed to Africa for a year, so yeah, it was kind of the nail in the coffin of it.
Did you have any difficulties kind of reintegrating back into society post deployments and things like that?
Yes and no. I never went on a true combat deployment, so I didn't really have the whole shell shock type of thing that we see in a lot of Afghan or Iraq vets. For me, it was more just dealing with. I work in medical, so death is a constant, and we had lost a couple patients in Africa that still kind of haunt me, and I'm not going to get into that here.
Right.
So it that kind of carried back with me, and I kind of had that chip on my shoulder from that. But other than that, it was pretty easy. I had a girlfriend at the time who was very good at getting me back into the swing of being back at home, if you will.
Okay.
But I was home for 2 months, and then I was on the carrier with you,
Right.
doing the hull
Which
swap from the G Dub to the Reagan.
which was an insane time. And then, we go over to Japan, and a lot of people, still think to this day that, it was just a lot of like running around Japan, Hello Kitty and getting sushi every day. There was some times of doing that, but that
Dude,
wasn't
I gained
just
so much weight in Japan just from eating the food. Like,
just the food.
it was that has to be one of my favorite things about Japan. Well, besides the culture and the history there, was the food. Oh my
Yeah, the food
God.
is.
All my money went
But
to eating out.
but the point what I'm getting at is when we weren't doing that, when we were out to sea on the carrier and things like that, what kind of things kept you sane? What kind of things were you doing in your off time to kind of?
Oh, I was gaming. I was writing. I was just. I've always been a creative mind, and if I'm not working, if I'm idle in a place that sucks, I kind of just go into my own skull and start being creative. And while I was out there, I had gotten into Dungeons and Dragons with a bunch of my buddies,
Okay.
and that kind of kept me sane because I was just designing my own campaigns. I designed a homebrew world, and I made a full like player's handbook just for this game I created, and that's what kept me sane is just being creative.
And did you ever at this point then kind of see like maybe I can do something more than just playing games with my friends? Like what were some of the production experience that you had before kind of leading into maybe I can do something besides just playing this thing?
So that didn't occur to me really until I was we were home in between our uh, deployments, and my roommate at the time had kind of put the bug in my ear like, hey, maybe you should try DMing. And I was like,
Okay.
nah. And he was just like, no, no, no. Here, watch this web series called Critical Role. It's a bunch of voice actors playing Dungeons and Dragons. I promise you'll get a kick out of it. And I was like, all right, fine. So I turn it on. I begin watching it. I was like, holy crap, I recognize all of these voices. So I kind of got pulled into it, and I fell in love with it. And I was sitting there watching Critical Role and Will Wheaton's Tabletop. And I was sitting there thinking to myself, after we had been
Love Will
playing,
Wheaton, by the way.
love Will Wheaton, Will Wheaton,
Will Wheaton.
love Will Wheaton, and I got to thinking, I was like, man, I could do this. Me and my buddies could do this. Our games are just as good as this. Why can't I do this?
Well, not to mention you knew how to work a camera. You had some experience around audio equipment.
And that was mainly the driving force behind it. Is I was like, yeah, I could do this. But what we had originally started going for was doing it as more of a podcast format. So
Before podcasting was even taken off the ground.
Before podcasting was even a thing, we were just going to record it as audio and then stream it that way. And I think the game we were going to do is my Call of Cthulhu game. For those who don't know what Call of Cthulhu is, it's based on the H.P. Lovecraft Eldritch horror series. Very Stephen King. Very dark, twisted, Twilight Zone-y type stuff going on there. And
don't worry, I have some questions for that stuff, but I want to get through the history and stuff first. But right, continue. Sorry.
So we had wanted to do that as a radio broadcast, kind of like an old timey radio show.
Okay.
So that was our original plan for it, and then technology never really worked, and we never really got it off the ground. But were
you trying to do Twitch or was it something else, Facebook, YouTube at the time, or?
So I had started watching web streamers, guys streaming video games at the time. Cause one of my buddies, Chase Fox, he was big into Slipgator at the time and Arc streams, and he was like, "Hey, check this guy out. He's really funny, and he does really good videos." So I turned it on, and I absolutely loved it. He was very funny. He was very charismatic. It was really it was a nice release. You could put it on in the background and leave it on, and it was just that audio that was just so nice. It felt like, I wasn't alone in my room. There was somebody else there playing video games with me. So, and again, I was sitting there, I was like, dude, I could do this. This is literally, there's nothing to it. It's just somebody streaming a video game. And my buddy Chase pointed out, he's like, hey, the PlayStation 4 has a stream option, right? No.
Directly from the PlayStation 4 is what he meant.
From the PlayStation, yeah, you could stream from the PlayStation. I was like, well, that's pretty cool. How do I do it? He's like, I think you just hit the stream button. And one day, me and him were sitting there, and I was like, okay, cool. And I pressed the stream button, and I set up a Twitch account. And that became...
Were you just doing audio and just the game? What game
no,
were
it was just, we were streaming Minecraft. It was me playing Minecraft, and that was the birth of the Doc Shippy persona. And because that was my gamer tag at the time on my PS4, and if you guys go on and search Doc Shippy in PlayStation Network, I'm there. That's me. So if I get a zillion friend requests, I'm denying you all. But because of that, it was that started the ball rolling into what became Enter the Gamer. That was me sitting there like, holy crap, I'm actually streaming. I'm playing video games online for the world to see. And I remember my heart being in my throat the entire time that first stream, like, oh my God, is there going to be other people watching? And then seeing that little number in the corner of viewers hopping on, and you see the comments start coming in, and it's just like, oh my God, there are people watching me right now.
Was it a stage fright kind of feeling, or was it more of a...
It was pure
shock and
terror.
awe.
It was pure and utter terror. It was stage fright times 1,000.
Okay. So you're sitting here, you're playing Minecraft, and so this is your first stream. How did it go? Did you have do you remember how many viewers?
I think I had upwards of 3 viewers stop in and 1 average. And it was kind of shocking for me. It was just like, holy crap, there are people that sit there and watch this. This is
there
amazing.
are, yeah.
And it, like I said, it completely and utterly blew my mind. So when that kind of got my gears turning, like, well, if I can do this, I bet I could get a bunch of my buddies to do this too.
Which is something you've done in the past. You've always included your buddies, your friends,
of course.
Things like that.
If I'm gonna get
Where
big, I'm
does
gonna
that
make sure I bring people up with me.
where does that sense of value come from when you always try to
the
include other people in your
it's
projects?
you know, it's an Italian mentality. You know, your friends are your family, and
Mhm.
you try to accumulate as big a family as possible. So for me,
Right,
growing up,
right.
my four best friends were like family to me, and we squabbled like family, and we would get pissed at each other like family, and we would, get over it like family. And even now, my best friend, he's like a brother to me, and in coming into the military, that almost accentuated that. As you well know, it's a different
Right.
type of mentality. Like these are guys that you live with 24 hours a day. You work with them. You see them at the gym. You see them while you're eating. You see them when you go to bed at night. They may as well be family. And you have the same type of squabbles that you do with family.
And would you say that, the guys that you were bringing, were they all military at the time, the guys that you were trying to bring in?
I originally reached out to my buddies that had done Wet Your Pants Entertainment with me at the initial start, and that idea of that came to me when I was watching Slipgator, and he was doing the Pooping Evolved server, and, and it was him and a bunch of other streamers coming together and playing on this server, and I was like, that's so cool, it's all these other streamers. I was like, what if I started a channel of just streamers that would hop on and just stream at whenever. So that got me thinking. I reached out to the Wet Your Pants Entertainment guys to start. My buddy Hayden, my buddy Andrew, my buddy Seth, and they were all. My buddy Andrew was in Taiwan at the time, and he's just like, yeah, that's pretty cool. Maybe if I ever find time again to do it, I'll hit you up. I was like, okay, cool. And my buddy Hayden was like, yeah, I got life going on, and I really don't want to stream. And I was like, okay, cool. And my buddy Seth was like, yeah, no. I was like, all right, fine. So I started reaching out to the guys I was stationed with, my buddy Tanner, you, and my buddy Chase. And again, they were all kind of the same mentality. They were all like, yeah. But I remember you were sitting in medical one day, and I had just finished designing the logo for the
Right.
brainchild of what would become Enter the Gamer. And it was I had
I remember
started
I
designing the
was
website the weekend before, and I was sitting. And my buddy Chase had said, you need a good logo for it. Slipgator has the weird S thing. Zul'jin has the Z. You need a cool logo. Geek and Sundry has a D6. Nerdist has the Nerdist logo, whatever the fuck that is. So you need something cool. I was like, shit. I
so you got to come up with something.
got to come up
So
with something.
where so was this at the time the Pond logo, was this that you had created then? Like where'd you go
So
from there?
the original logo for Enter the Gamer was actually a dodecahedron. It was kind of like a hexagon type, all blacked
Mhm.
out with ETG in the center of it, which was almost very reminiscent of the Critical Role logo. And one of my buddies at the time, I think it was my buddy Walker, was just like, "Hey man, that looks a lot like the Critical Role
Looks
logo." And I
right.
was like, "Shit, it is."
So
So
was
I was sitting there. I had just finished watching. I had done a binge of kung fu movies that Sunday, and the next day I was sitting there at work and I was doodling up designs. I was taking vital signs for the clinic, and I had drawn up it was kind of like a mannequin figurine holding two nunchucks with a power symbol over his face, and that was the original Enter the Gamer logo. And I took the design from Enter the Dragon because that was my
the Bruce
mentality,
Lee movie.
the Bruce Lee movie, because that thought of Enter the Dragon, Enter the Gamer, because we're gonna fight everybody, we're gonna go on and conquer the world.
So you're saying the origin of Enter the Gamer and the logo comes from a Bruce Lee.
Comes from Bruce Lee. Yep.
I think a lot of listeners will be pleased to hear that.
Yeah.
One of one of the best martial artists of all time.
Greatest martial artist of our all time, and did so much for movies at the time. Did his own stunts, and the people he brought up with him, Jackie Chan, Sammo Young, and all these other guys. It was just Chuck Norris. So, to have that, and then be like, all right, I need to incorporate that somehow, that awesomeness into my company's logo. And that's where the pawn came from. And it wasn't initially the pawn. So I had designed, like I said, I designed the mannequin, is what I refer to it as now, holding the two controllers nunchuck wise. And I was like, that is way too complicated to be a logo. That is way too complicated. And because I sat there in freaking Photoshop sitting there trying to design it, and I was like, oh God, this hurts. So that ended up drying up pretty quick, and I was like, I don't like that idea. And one of my other buddies was like, hey, I found this website called Canva. Why don't you try that? So I went on to Canva and I was playing around with it, and they had the perfect silhouette of a person, and I was like, dude, that looks like a pawn. And then I started playing with it, and that's actually where the pawn logo comes from, is Canva.
And what about the power symbol? There's a question I was going to bring up later, but since we're already talking about it, the power symbol, where does the power symbol come into
So
play?
each of the parts of the pawn logo has something to do with gaming. The pawn itself is tabletop gaming. The power symbol is video gaming, and then you have
Turning on the console.
turning on the console, and then you have the figure itself, which is the gamer.
Right. So at this point, what was Enter the Gamer then? Were you just had the streams on Twitch for the Minecraft? Did you have a website or anything like that?
I had just started designing a website. It was like it was Enter the Gamer and .wix blah blah blah. The full. It was the free page, and it was mainly just a landing page to start, saying when I would go live, and that was it. There was nothing fancy about it, no bells or whistles. It wasn't like the web page we have now. It was very basic. It was a white girl in Uggs with puffy North Face vest. It was, it was basic.
What were some of your aspirations that you wanted to put onto the website at first?
I've always been the type where I dream big. I don't settle for a mediocre thought. I dream very, very big. And I wanted to be the next Geek and Sundry. I had planned, and I still have it somewhere, as I drew up a big board, and those of you those who don't know, if when you work in TV industry, the
pretty much any entertainment industry, really.
Any entertainment, but the network has this board where they keep all the shows and the time slots for each of the shows and what show's going where. And I had actually designed one of those for our web streams and what shows I wanted to do and where and all that type of stuff. And it wasn't until I sat there and I had that designed up. I think I had 8 unique shows, streaming 6 nights a week, from 4 p.m. through 10 p.m.
And how many people were you working with?
It was just me.
Just
it was.
So
just
you come
me
up with
time.
all the concepts and things like that. And for those of you, if you go on our Facebook and you can look in, you can read our story and kind of see how a little bit into how Dan and I met, but which doesn't go into full detail. I wanted to elaborate a little bit further into that, and it brings me to my next question. What was your intention? What was, from your perspective, when you handed me the paper that had you said you designed it, you had the logo? What was your intention when you first handed me that paper in medical?
So with that, I think it goes back to when you and I were first introduced. Tanner introduced us because he thought you were in my fraternity. He's like, yeah, I know this other Sigma guy, and he's very cool. Right. And you're like, no, Tanner, I'm Sigma Chi. Ooh, what's the difference?
Those you listen, yeah, break that down a little bit. Yeah, so Sigma Nu and Sigma Chi. I joined Sigma Chi when I was in college and things like that. And I remember telling Tanner on deployment, hey, I know a guy who is Sigma Nu, that I went to boot camp with that happens to also be over here too. And he was like, oh, I know a guy that also Sigma Nu. And he's like, aren't you Sigma Nu? I was like, no, I'm Sigma Chi. But I remember him still telling you that I also was Sigma Nu.
And I remember you had come into medical for some reason. Tanner's like, oh, Dan, this is the guy that, and this is how Tanner talks, mind you. He's like, oh, Dan, so this is the guy I was telling you about. He's really big into, he's in a fraternity too. It's Sigma Nu, right? And you're like, no, Tanner, Sigma Chi. Right. No, same difference.
No, so I remember I had my wisdom teeth were taken out a year prior, but then I had another dental surgery because they ended up like doing another X-ray and found out that there was still a piece left up in there. So they went in there and pulled it out, and I was kind of basically just doing office bitch work around my squadron for like a month. I was bored out of my mind. I was getting people's mail, I was doing all that stuff. So I remember, coming in and I would walk in there and just, and I'll be honest with you now that I'm out and I can say things like this, I was in there sometimes just to talk to you guys.
I mean, everybody loves the Corpsman. What can we say?
Right. Do you, this is something I also wanted to bring up later, but we can talk now. Do you remember some of the first conversations that we brought up, one of the first topics that we brought up after that moment of us being introduced?
No. Like I said, that a lot of that time was a blur, and my as I'm get older, my memory becomes worse and worse.
One thing that stuck out to me is that you showed me Call of Cthulhu and you brought up somehow, I don't know, maybe you guys had some access to the website, but when I tried to do it later, I couldn't bring it up. But you brought up an HP Lovecraft website on the
Oh
computer,
yeah,
and you showed me some,
www.hplovecraft.com.
yeah, and you showed me some of his stories and things like that, and I instantly was drawn to it. But back to my question though, what was your intention when
So when I had just finished designing that logo, and I just was looking for feedback on it, and you and I had a conversational acquaintanceship at that time, and I was like, "What do you think of this?" And very Doc Shippy moment, just what do you think? And you were like, "What is this?"
All right, all right.
You were. It was like I just handed you a dick pic. You were like, "What am I looking at here, bro?" And then I wanted to describe it. I was like, "What do you think about a website where we, got a bunch of streamers together, and we would live stream and have fun and do articles?" And I think I gave you the full pitch for what I was dreaming
Yeah.
Enter the Gamer to be, and because a lot of that was me talking myself into that too as I was describing it, and the way I get ideas and the way I talk through, I figure things out for myself is I talk to people about it. Like whenever I'm working on a novel, if I'm ever hit a writer's block, I'll sit there and discuss my story with people and get feedback, and then I'll get excited about talking about it, and that usually helps me through it. And I'd kind of hit that wall after designing that first logo, and I was like, well, shit. Now I have the makings of a logo. What the fuck am I gonna do with it?
Right,
So
right.
that's when I handed it to you, and I was like, "Hey, this is the thing." And you're like, "Well, what is it?" And I was on the spot, and I was like, "Well, it's this, and it's this."
Would you say at this moment you were like, wow, so this thing, all these ideas and things I put into my head, I now I have to pitch it to someone and
Exactly, and
right.
that was the first true Enter the Gamer pitch. Is that was me going, because I had only intended it to just be me streaming Ark with a bunch of buddies or Minecraft with a bunch of buddies, uh, but like Slipgator or Zul'jin or Mazion or Ninja, and then it became, well, why settle for that? Why
Right.
settle for just being a persona when I can build something bigger? And I had it Enter the Gamer kind of morphed from there. After I had handed you that and we were discussing it and you got all excited about it too. Um, that
Well, because
night,
from my
yeah,
my aspect, I went home and I handed it to my roommate, and I remember he had just gotten back from work, and he was like, "What is that?" And I explained it to him, and I was like, "Yeah, so this guy, he's talking to me about video games and journalism and stuff like that." And I've always kind of been interested. It's like, so and I really didn't know what was going on. My first thought was I gotta impress this guy. So I was like, I want to write something, I want to do something good. Were any other people doing articles then, or?
it was just me. I was
Hmm.
writing under the Doc Shippy tag, and so, but it was kind of weird too, because after that conversation you and I had, I went home and I had been thinking about it, and I was watching Critical Role, and there was something that kind of stuck with me from that episode of Critical Role, and it kind of drastically changed what Enter the Gamer became. And for me, that was in this one episode, they were putting up shout outs they had gotten from their fans. And one of the fans had written to them, like, hey, I really appreciate what you guys do and everything. There are some days when I'm feeling really lonely and, I'm by myself and I get really depressed. I'll put you guys on, and it's nice to have you guys in the background, even though you're not really there. It makes me think, and I remember being there because, being in Japan, we didn't really have anybody. It was just us.
Right.
All of our
Those are the
family
people
was,
that you had
yeah,
on base. Yeah.
it was just us. And there'd be times I would get super lonely. I was dating I had a girlfriend of 3 years at that point that was back in the States, and I talked to her once, twice a day, if that.
Yeah.
And it was a very lonely experience, and I got very depressed. And doing that, and I related to that. I was like, oh shit, I do that. I put on the streamers and I don't feel as lonely anymore. And that's kind of what morphed the mentality of what Enter the Gamer was to me at that time. It was like, no, 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 I want this to be something bigger because I want to be the voice in the back of the room for somebody.
So we have the articles going up, and you have the website. Was it still
So
the .wix then, or
the articles really didn't start going up until I got back stateside.
okay?
And I remember you had written one. I forget. I think it was the MLB The Show one. You had your first article, and I had been just kind of playing with it. I didn't really have anything going with it at the time, and it was I had just transferred out of Japan. I was home on leave. I was sitting in a Starbucks working on the website, and I had just finished updating your article. In fact, you are to blame for what Enter the Gamer's become. And instead of hitting save, I accidentally hit publish. And that's when we were it was wix.com/enterthegamer.wix. And, long and drawn out bullshit. And I had accidentally hit publish and I panicked. And I was like, oh my God, it's live. That thing I had been working on and conceptualizing and playing with because it's a funny idea is now live.
Now into the public. The button has been pressed.
The
It's
button has
now
been pressed. There is
viewable.
no taking it back. It is out there to the universe. And I had a coming to God moment at that time because I was sitting, and I feel bad for everybody that was sitting in Starbucks with me because I had a full on panic attack. I was getting up, I was pacing. I bet they were thinking that somebody just died because I was a complete nervous wreck. I was pacing back and forth. I was like, oh my God, what just happened? Oh my God, what
Poor
did I
fella.
just do? And I remember this one girl came over. She's like, "You okay?" I was like, "Yeah, just this
Right.
project I'm working on. It's something happened." She's like, "Oh, okay, all right," and just kind of walked away from me. Like, we're gonna walk away from the crazy man now. But I remember I had messaged Chase, and I was like, "Dude, something just happened," and he's just like, "Go big or go home, homie. It's out there." And I was like, "You know what? You're right." I bought our first domain name. I paid for premium Wix so we wouldn't have to deal with the .wix whatever bullshit.
And
And
have
we
your
were
own thing. Yep.
enterthegamer.org. I spent the premium to get the Canva account so I could make our logo official and everything. And we were live. And I remember that it was May, if I'm correct, because I had just transferred out of there and I was in process to coming here or Cherry Point rather, and that was the beginning of the end for me, really. Uh, yeah.
How do you mean by that? But the beginning of the end was, do you mean that Enter the Gamer was kind of falling
Oh no,
outside, or
it was live. This creature I had created from the safety of my room in the confines. It was loose in the streets, and there was
now
no
started?
taking it
Right.
back at that point. It was the end. The game had started.
Right. Right.
When you're sitting there and you're
So
like, I don't know if I'm going to play this game, and you have that quarter in your hand, and you're kind of hovering over the, putting in that 25 cents, and then somebody smacks your hand and you drop it in, and it says, Player One, select your character, and you're like, well, shit, now I have to play.
right.
That
So what
was
was your
that for me.
intention after that point? What was your intention with the website and things like that? Because for me, I was still over in Japan, and I was still working and doing, going on and doing the stuff that we were doing previous. But you, while you back here, were still, going full speed ahead and putting together, a little bit
So
more of what we
with
know.
with that, Enter the Gamer, I had fully intended it on being nothing more than articles to start. It was just going to be articles. You know, we were going to do an article website. It was going to be a lot of good journalistic pieces about video games. I remember you were writing Coast to Coast with AJ East Coast, and I was writing Impatient Tapping as the Doc Shippey personality, talking about just mobile games. And I was doing critical reviews on mobile games and being like, hey, is this worth downloading? And that was a lot of fun. It was really the first start for ETG. And actually, we were called Enter the Gamer at the time. Just Enter the Gamer.
No actual. Yep.
No actual.
I remember that.
And I would be going to Starbucks to work on the stuff because I didn't want to work on the barracks. And then something happened. And it became more than what it was originally. It became more than just articles, and that was I had wanted to start streaming again. My buddy Steve, we had been playing D&D together, and my buddy Steve was like, "Hey, I thought didn't you say you used to do web streaming?" And I was like, "Oh yeah, I haven't done that in a hot minute." And he's like, "Well, you run this company now. Why don't you stream as the company?"
Yeah.
And I was like, "I never thought of that." And so I sat down and I remember streaming the first episode of Minecraft. And it was me in my barracks room streaming Minecraft with my buddy Steve. And that was the beginning of the video portion of Enter the Gamer. And it was a complete mess. I streamed for 2 hours. I had people coming in and out of my room. The internet was spotty. There were, I think I had one viewer the entire time. And then we did... What else did we do? It was just Minecraft streams to start, really. And then we got into Fortnite when it was Save the World. And my buddy John was like, hey, why don't you also stream this? This is a brand new game. It's still in alpha. It's a lot of fun. We can get up to 4 players playing it. I was like, oh, yeah, that would be a lot of fun. So me, Steve, and John were playing that. And we would live stream that for a little bit. But that was before they had come out with the Battle Royale version.
Right.
And we kind of lost interest in it really quick. And I began streaming Ark instead. And I did a weekly show Monday nights called Please No Kill, where I would play Ark, and every time I died, I would do 10 push-ups. And if you've never played Ark, the learning curve in Ark is very, very steep. And you die a lot at the very beginning. And it takes a lot of perseverance to get to the higher levels where you can actually stand up to a T-Rex and not get your face ripped off in the first 3 seconds.
So what you're saying is your physical fitness was at your highest point because you were dying. So
I was losing a lot of that Japan weight I had put on. And I remember I was doing a lot with the Twitter at the time. I was doing a lot with just posting funny D&D memes and D&D stuff. But we didn't really start doing D&D streams until I had moved out of the barracks and I was living with my buddy Griffin when we fully started doing video stuff. And I had been working on trying to do video stuff for a while. I'd been talking about it, and my buddies were like, oh, yeah, sure. If you ever decide to do it, let me know. And I kept toying with the idea. And then...
Not the same Griffin that we have now that we just signed.
No, different Griffin.
Different Griffin, yeah.
And then we were sitting there, and one of, the DMs Guild. There was a guy on the DMs Guild that's like, hey, like third person to share my post gets a free gaming module. And I was like, okay, fine. So I shared his shit. And he gave me a free module for D&D. And I was like, well, shit.
Now, do you mean, is this something that he created himself, or?
Yep, it was a homebrew campaign called Lady Seppa and the Soul Weeper. It was a Halloween-themed game. It was a lot of fun. And he just gave it to you. He's like, here you go. You guys want it fair and square. And I was like, dude, how would you feel if we streamed it for you? And he was like, seriously? I was like, yeah. How would you feel if we streamed it for you? He was like, dude, that'd be awesome. This, that, and the other thing. That would be great. So I had bought equipment to start doing audio type stuff at the time. And I had a small soundboard. I had bought a video camera. So we could do studio type stuff so I could upload it to YouTube. That was my original intentions. But with that, one of my buddies said, why don't you do it like Critical Role and do a live stream? And I was like, ooh, we do have the Twitch account. Why don't we do it that way? So I got our first cast together and we were streaming out of Griffin's living room.
And how many people did you have?
So we had Alex working tech. We had my buddy Lee working tech. And our role players were Aoski, my buddy Steve, Matt Browning, and Joseph Griffin. And they were our big three for that shoot. And then I was DMing it. And we went live, I think it was the week after Halloween, because it didn't, like all ETG productions, and that was the start of it, our tech decided to shit itself the day we were supposed to start streaming.
You're saying that this is where the bad luck started?
Yep, this is where the ETG bad luck started. And I had a temper tantrum, my emotional breakdown. I was like, this was supposed to be our first stream, which is broken, it's terrible. And then we reset. I broke down. I went on YouTube. I was reading how to troubleshoot this stuff, and I figured it all out. I taught myself Twitch overnight and OBS overnight. And then the week after, we went live. And that was the very beginning of the Enter the Gamer live series. And that's when the bug kind of bit me. And I was like, ooh, this is possible. We can do this. I had 2 web cameras and a small lighting kit and a super tiny soundboard, and I was like, we can do this. This is real. I can get this happening. So I got Steve on. Steve was the first person I got on board, and it was me and him doing Please No Kill Monday and Tuesday nights from 8 to 10. Then my buddy...
Did you have any other content besides Monday and Tuesday then?
Nope, that was it. It was just Monday, Tuesday at the very beginning. And then after that, we got my buddy Matt coming on, and he was just like, hey, I want to stream too. I was like, cool, we can get you on for Wednesday nights. So now we had Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. And then we had my buddy Farva that I had been deployed with when we were in Africa, Corey Williams, and he was just like, hey, I can stream. I was like, oh.
Can Farva do it? Was that when he's doing Can Farva do it? For those of you who don't know, Can Farva do it? He was playing different sports games, Madden, and trying to win championships and things like that.
Doing the most outlandish challenges that he would set for himself. Like, I'm going to try to win the Super Bowl as the Browns. And just get smoked. And the best part about it was he would be trying so hard. And he would fail spectacularly. And we'd all be like, oh, Farva, no. And he'd be like, oh, but it's okay, guys. I got farther than I thought I would.
So it seemed like ETG was kind of taken off at that point. And from my aspect, I was still over there. And I remember doing streams for you at 2 o'clock in the afternoon, my time, which would have been, I think, just around 8 or 9 o'clock, you guys.
It was Saturdays, too, if I remember correctly.
Yeah. Because I was not only on the top of the time change, I also had the night shift. So I was kind of trying to stick on your guys' schedule as well. So I didn't really see too much of the behind the scenes aspect. But for me, and this leads me to my next question, before Enter the Gamer Actual, what happened? Because at some point for me, things just halted and went to a stop. Things went to a stopping point. And I remember I was sending you articles. There was a backup of articles that I had. I was reviewing a few other different games. I didn't see anything going on. There wasn't a lot of communication happening at that point. What happened?
So
the momentum stopped. The train was at the station and didn't continue on.
That was when ETG went through its first kind of shutdown. At the time, it was we had a full staff. We were doing weekly meetings. Or I had started doing weekly meetings with everybody just so we could all get everybody on board. And I had started taking kind of a president type of role of our fledgling web streaming service, if you will. And
3 in the morning for me, by the way. Thank you.
You're welcome. So we would sit there and I would get everybody together. And we had an amazing web designer at the time, Alexis McDaniel, who she built the website that we have now, and in fact, you can still see her shout out page on our website. But she and I had a massive falling out. And when that happened, I think it kind of sent ripples through the group we had. And she ended up taking Matt with her. And Farva just kind of fell off. He had other things to do. And
Was this you guys weren't seeing eye to eye? Was there like a
we weren't
romantic
seeing
thing?
no
Or
we weren't seeing eye to eye. We had a lot of creative differences in what she wanted, and I was putting a lot of pressure on her as a manager at the point, and she wasn't getting paid for it, and I wasn't, paying anybody. We were all doing it for free,
right.
and because of that, she was like, "I don't have to work for you," and I was like, "Then fucking go."
And it was the point that not that you weren't paying anybody because you didn't want to, just because what was there to be paid. You right?
Yeah, we
is
weren't
what,
making any money.
right.
So it's and it was just all of us. We were just doing a thing so we could have fun with it. There was no advertising. There was no. We were just trying to get to the point where we could be an actual streaming business, like what we are now. And we had that falling out, and then I had a very bad breakup, and it was things kind of fell apart, and I just did not want to look at doing articles and everything, and it felt wrong going onto the website for a while, and the website kind of just halted.
Right. I refer to this time as kind of like the silent era.
The dark times is what I refer
the
to
darkest.
as the dark ages of ETG. And,
Well, I would love to call it the dark times, but I think we didn't know that this year was coming. But
yeah. So what ended up happening with that was I also, work was kicking my ass, and I needed to focus on work, and I had some personal stuff going on, and ETG fell apart. And so that was the fall of the first ETG empire. And then
would you say that from a business perspective, and you like you mentioned before that you did have like a presidential role, would you say that that some of the things that were going on in your personal life, does it kind of bleed into that aspect because you are a public figure at the top and people are looking to you? Does sometimes the personal life bleed into that? Just 'cause, does it affect anything that you have to do?
So one
day
of
to
the
day?
issues is I'm very good at turning it off and turning it on. Like, I know when it's time to be business. I know when it's time to be Dan, and I know when it's time to be Doc Shippey. And
Right.
my friends that were doing it with me at the time were looking at it as, oh, we're all friends working on this thing, not as this is a business. So a lot of them took it personally when I'd be like, hey, this is trash. You need to get rid of this. You need to get rid of this. You need to get rid of this. They would take it personally, like, dude, the hell, I just worked my ass off all night on this, and you're telling me it's bullshit. And I also wasn't. I'm a very blunt person, and I tend to come off abrasive sometimes. And I was coming off very abrasive, and it took Steve, who was the current VP at the time, and he was just like, dude, calm down, think about what's going on here, look at how you're talking to people. And I was like, oh. So that kind of it was what started ETG to just self implode, and that's what happened is we fell apart, and the website went dark. I tried keeping it going for a while, just me. Steve went on deployment, and it was just me doing all the streams. I was streaming Monday nights with Please No Kill, Thursday nights for Ask the GM, and then I was doing. I think you and Farva were still streaming with us. Farva was streaming Thursdays before Ask the GM, and then I would also do streams on Sundays. And it just got to be too much, and I burned myself out, and I was like, yeah, I'm done. I can't keep doing this. There's nobody else coming around. And then ETG got a stroke of luck. I ended up working with this coffee shop company, or this coffee shop called Coffee and Cool Stuff in Havelock. Leslie O'Brien and I had this kind of working relationship where she would let us use that as a studio, and I would work for her for free.
Hmm.
So we got free studio space, but I had to work, what was it, like 4 hours for free a week.
And what kind of work was she asking of you?
Oh, it was very basic. It was just running a coffee shop, and I had done
Mm.
some work previously working at a coffee shop, so I could mix a latte like nobody's business, and I brought a lot of fancier drinks to the menu, and it was a very nice working relationship. I allowed her to extend her hours, but when ETG fell apart, I just kind of fell into a rut working there, and I just maintained that. Um, but because of that, while I was there, Leslie kind of lit a fire under my ass, and she was like, "Hey, you have this website, you have this page, you have no content going out on it. Do something."
Okay.
And I was like, "Okay." So I went to the local game store, Rules of Engagement Games, 19 Park Lane, Havelock. It would be
So
remiss if I didn't give them a shout out.
is this where the relationship started then in the timeline with the rules of engagement games?
So I'd been going to Rules of Engagement since I got here, and I'd been mentioning to them that I ran this webpage, and they were like, "Oh, cool." They were very welcoming about it.
And what kind of
And
things were you doing at the store?
nothing really. I didn't really start working with them until after the first Fallout.
Okay.
Once the second rendition of ETG started up was when we started. Or no, I blame my last. We were doing stuff. We were doing tournament streams. Like we would be recording the games they would be having in the shop, and then
Hmm.
I would cut them up and edit them for YouTube. And then I would upload it to YouTube, and it was a lot of fun. They shop got a lot of good business out of it. People were coming all over because hey, these guys are getting live streamed. Their games are getting live streamed. Like holy crap! So that started a working relationship with them, and I was doing this stuff with Coffee and Cool Stuff, and we were starting this little trifecta of stuff up in Havelock. And then the first Dark Ages happened, and it all kind of stopped. And then Jesse from Rules of Engagement Games was like, "Hey, I want to do a show." And I was like,
And what was Jesse's position at ROE? What was he doing
he's one
there?
of the co-owners of ROE,
Okay.
and he's like, "Hey, I want to do a show." And I was like, "Okay, what type of show?" And we had been talking about it at the coffee shop. He's just like, "Yeah, I want to do a show where we just bitch about things that are happening in tabletop gaming. You can call it the salt mines. Things that are happening in the forums, things that people are bitching about, dredging the salt mines for stuff." And I was like, "Okay, yeah, that sounds kind of fun." And that's when we had our first salt mines episode. Came from that relationship, and it was me, Jesse, and my buddy Devin, who is going to be coming back to do Gamer Interrupted with you when he finishes school.
Hmm.
Um, Devin, he was Jesse was mainly the driving force, but that actually is what kept Enter the Gamer going because I was getting ready to sell all the shit, getting ready to give it all up, and Jesse's like, "No, no, no, we got to keep this up. We got to keep this up. It was a lot of fun. Let's keep dealing with it." So then I put out the second call for Enter the Gamer people, and we started spinning back up again. And I messaged you. I was like, "Hey AJ, you still interested?" And you're like, "Oh yeah." And then I messaged Farva, and Farva was like, "Oh yeah, I still want to do it." And I was like, "Cool."
So besides these people telling you that you wanted to, continue to the second resurgence, what else was it that was kind of lighting the fire for you? What else was like, I can do this again?
That was
Because
pretty much
I
it. It
guess the
was
point.
just other people telling me, "Hey, we want to do this," and I was like, "Cool." And so with that, I kind of went into it half-heartedly, and it was
Did you, would it be safe to say, did you ever have any sense of failure that this could happen again, that things could go stagnant again? Did those thoughts ever cross your mind
oh,
at this point?
failure is never in the back of my mind when it comes to stuff like this. It was just I was burnt out. It was just like I really don't
Hmm.
want to have to start doing this stuff again, and I went into it half-heartedly, and we got a couple streams started, and again, we started doing the salt mines again. I started doing Ask the GM again. I got a couple other people who were interested in doing streams, and then it just fell out again because it was just there wasn't enough interest in it, and a lot of the driving force that had been there all kind of left again, and I was like, I can't do this again. You know, it's already fallen apart twice. Whatever, and I left it. And that's when we went into the second Dark Ages.
Well, I remember at that point, then, we fall into that silence, but then there was the third resurgence, and I refer to this time as the summer of success because um, you had started opening up. Tell us a little bit about like how you started opening up the company, more of just like involving your friends to do these streams and things, but people actually having says and doing involvement with you. You
So,
started setting, did you start
uh,
setting up Enter the Gamer more as a business and with standing operator at this point?
so Enter the Gamer started up for a third time. I had just had another breakup. I was sitting there by myself. It was a Thursday night. It was just me, and I was like, you know what? No. I think I'm going to bring this back. And I was looking at the webpage. I was looking at our Facebook. I was looking at all these other things that that we had started. And I was like, why am I just going to let this sit here and die? This is something I built with my own hands. I'm going to, I need to get this started again. And I did what I like to refer to as the call to arms for Enter the Gamer. And I did a live broadcast on Facebook on the ETG page as me going, hey
Yep.
guys, Doc Shippy, Dan here. Enter the Gamer. We kind of fell off, but we're back. I'm bringing you the website back. If this is something you guys want to see. I already talked to so and so, and as I'm doing that, I'm getting messages from people like, "Hey Doc, I want to do it." And I think you were one of the ones that had sent me a message because you had seen the shout out and you were like, "Dude, we're doing this. Let's freaking do this. I'm down." And Farva messaged me. He was like, "Hey, I'm in." And then my buddy Steve messaged me, like, "Hey, let's do this. I'm interested." And then we got like five other people that were like, "Hey, I want to do this. That was a lot of fun. Let's bring it back." And so that's what started the summer of success for Enter the Gamer.
And I
And
refer to that time because on Twitch we had a stream every single day. I
we
remember,
dominated the
yeah,
8 to 10 p.m. bracket Monday through Friday,
every single day. Yes, I do remember that.
every single day.
I remember we had a meeting as we always do on a Sunday, and I remember reporting to you guys that was the first week that we had ever had content every single day, and I remember you just getting very excited about that. Was that kind of a point for you finally saw a successful fruition of what you were looking for from what was that, 3 years now since the point of where we're at in the timeline?
So that was the second year of ETG is when I
Hmm.
did the call to arms and brought it back. And that one, when I went into it this third time, I remember I had it sat down with Leslie from Coffee and Cool Stuff, and she was just like, if you're going to do it, you need to do it as an actual business this time. You need to
Hmm.
get everybody on board. You need to
Have the
contract people.
guidelines.
You have to lay out these guidelines so people know what they're getting into before they get started. And my buddy Steve had just gotten back from deployment, and he said the same exact thing. He's just like, look, the reason why it fell apart those first two times is because you were expecting stuff from people that didn't think they had to put out that much.
Right, right.
You need to get everybody on the same page. Once you get everybody on the same page, you can hold them accountable for stuff, and you can be like, hey, you signed a contract. This is what you need to do.
So just by pushing out contracts and things like that, did that kind of help negate some of the issues that you ran in previously?
So that actually got everybody on the same page with what we were doing. It was like, hey, this is kind of what we're doing. But that the contracts didn't really start until later after we had finally decided that we were going to go the business route. But I had secretly behind the scenes been building it as a business this third time. Me and Steve
Hmm.
were CEO and or president and VP, but we had gotten a group of people around us that we would refer to as the first batch of like the board of directors, if you will. So we started doing the web streams, and it started with a guy named Scott. He was doing Ask the GM. Was it Ask the GM? Oh, By the Numbers. My
By the
buddy,
numbers,
yeah,
right?
my buddy Gray had suggested a show to Kyle called By the Numbers, in which you sat down and learned how to build characters or learned how to build games by the numbers, literally from the book. So Scott took that. He's like, "Hey, yeah, no, that's a great idea. Yeah, let's do a whole series on this." And it would be me and Scott every Thursday night doing By the Numbers. And then my buddy Kyle got on board. He's like, "Yeah, I want to do it." And my buddy Gray got on board. He's like, "Yeah, I want to do it." And my buddy Steve came back, and then we had this huge group that wanted to do D&D stuff. So I was like, "All right, well, why don't we do a series called One Shot, where we do one shot campaigns and go from there?"
What does
And
that mean? The one shot campaign.
a one shot campaign is a one, guts or glory type of game. It is, you have one chance to get as much badass stuff to happen to you as possible in this game.
Okay.
So we would do One Shot as a companion show to By the Numbers. And that was how ETG truly started back up, was those two shows. Got us back on the map. They started getting us viewers. They started getting us stuff. Then I started web streaming again Monday nights, doing my Minecraft show.
Mm-hmm.
The beauty of building.
And then we tried
or Brick by Brick with
Wed-
Doc Shippey. And then we
we
started
tried
a
the
Wednesday show.
Night, the
Nautical
nautical,
Nights. Yep.
right.
And at that point, we were streaming at least 5 hours, or what was it, 12 hours a week.
We weren't doing it every day, but we were
No.
maintaining all of the requirements that were necessary to maintain that early affiliation.
Yeah, and it was after a one-shot screening that we got our official notice that we were officially affiliated with Twitch. And that was an aha moment for me. And that's when I was like, all right, now it's the shit or get off the pot time. If we're going to do this, we have to make it a business. And that's where a lot of butthurt started in the company. Because that's when I was like, hey guys, if we're going to do this and we want to become a business doing it, these are the steps we have to go through. Now it's an affiliation.
Now, was money kind of something that you were looking for, or was that kind of just like an added bonus? Like, what was your driving force for just to making the business? Was it
So for me, making it a business was in part because we were an affiliate now, we could start making money off of it.
Mm-hmm.
And if we were going to start making money off of it, I couldn't in good conscience say, claim the money as my own, because it wasn't mine. It was everybody that was a part of Enter the Gamers.
Mm-hmm.
So that's when I was like, in good conscience, I can't claim this money. I need to reinvest it in the company, but there's no defining lines for the company. And that's when me and Steve were sitting there talking about it. We're like, yeah, we need to make this a legit business. So I gathered everybody together. I started establishing a board of directors. It was me, you, Scott, Kyle, Gray, and Steve. And there was no defined positions. It was just we were the board of directors, the six of us. And then after we got an affiliation, people started butting heads, because one side of the company wanted to go one way, the other side of the company wanted to go the other way, and there was me kind of caught in the center of it. And that's when I was like, all right, if this is what we're going to do, we're giving people positions.
Were there any experiences from your past, like from the beginning of the interview that we talked about, and I think I know the answer to this, but were there anything from there that you were able to kind of revel back to that helped you in this moment kind of set up?
So a lot of it was my military experience.
Mm-hmm.
It was working at Coffee and Cool Stuff, seeing how Leslie ran her business, working just in the first iteration of ETG, seeing our failures, and then taking that and being like, all right, I don't want this to die again. How am I going to go about making this stable?
At any point, did you have to separate being boss and friend with um, the current how it was at that time?
Oh yeah, there were numerous times where I would have to sit there, and this was after the contracts came out, and I was like, "Hey guys," and this was after our first trip with the lawyer, that I was like, "Hey guys, we're a business now, this, that, and the other thing," and I remember in meetings, and you remember in meetings where I would sit there and be like, "Yeah, we're not doing that," and
Hmm.
there would be some rampant butt hurt going around, and I'd be like, "Nope, yeah,
Can't do it, right?
we're not doing that. This is why we're not doing that. Move on." And there were a lot of conflicting in the early days. There were a lot of conflicting ideals of what people wanted ETG to be. A lot of people wanted us to start merchandising right out the gate. There were a lot of wanting to do shows that we really could not support, and I was I was the bad guy. I was like, no, we can't do that. No, we can't do that. Nope, we don't have the manpower. And then finally, I got fed up with it, and I was like, you know what? If you can put it together and you want to executive produce it, go for it. And that got people even more butthurt because then that meant they had to put the show together. That meant they would have to sit there, coordinate the techs, coordinate the staff, coordinate the location, and get somebody who could help manage all that shit at the same time. And that caused even more butthurt because I guess they were expecting me to do all that work. And I'm like, I am already producing 3 shows on top of maintaining the web page. And that's
You would have to say that your plate was pretty full.
my plate was full on top of, and that was when we fully defined the positions, and I was the CEO of the company at that point. And
Hmm.
that's when I had to really be like, there's a line. You are here, I am here. And for the majority of us, because most of us were military, that was like everybody just kind of fell into place. Like, yeah, it makes sense. But the civilian aspects of the company did not get it. And they were like, yeah, I'm not a soldier. This is not what I do. I don't fall in line. I thought we were all on an even playing field. And that's where things started going from bad to worse. And we kind of stagnated for a little bit after we got that, we reached that level. And once we removed that toxic part of the company, we started spinning back up again. But a lot of it has been a series of starts and stops in ETG.
And that kind of brings me to my next question of, you know, if, we weren't making money like, like some of the other people on Twitch where we weren't pulling, a couple thousand, a few thousand biddies a night and, that we weren't having 250 viewers coming in
I
and,
mean,
and
hell, we
sending
were
us.
lucky if we were getting 3.
Right. And some of the times, those 3 viewers might have just been me, you, and Steve,
Yeah,
and the point I'm trying to make is that at the end all of it, if you knew that we weren't going to, of course that's the dream for one day, hopefully, but if we weren't going to get that from the get go, from the restart, what was it that you wanted to provide for people to continue on now for the third time? Because you've already mentioned that it wasn't a fear of failure. What was it that you wanted to continue on for it this time?
it was, again, it was that I wanted to be the voice in the background for somebody who needed it. Like,
Hmm.
I didn't care. For me, I don't get dismayed when I have a show of one person watching. That doesn't
Right.
bother me. I'm still going to be there streaming because I know if I upload it to YouTube later, somebody may benefit with that. And if you notice, that was around the time we changed our logo and changed our tag sign. Our tag sign originally was geeky stuff for people who like geeky things.
Yep.
And I changed that to never game alone because that was the mindset I was going with. Gaming is a very lonely experience, and it doesn't have to be, especially in today's day and age with technology running rampant everywhere. There's no reason for you to feel alone when you're gaming. You know, just have somebody, some YouTuber on in the background playing a game that you enjoy. Just having that extra voice helps. Like, there'll be nights I'll be sitting here working on something, and I'll have Slipgator on just so I can hear somebody else in the room with me. So
We brought it up on the Thursday night Gamer Interrupted stream, and we had Joby by, and thank you again for being able to bail us out that night when we were able to stream from your computer that night. But we brought it up that, Joby, she established her community, and that's very important to her. That it's always been important to you in particular that you have not only the community around you, but would you say that the community that you're trying to build, whether whoever it may be, is the driving force for Enter the Gamer?
The driving force for Enter the Gamer has always been the viewer, and that's why I make a point in every show I do to thank the viewers for tuning in, because we wouldn't be doing what we do if it wasn't for them. I always make a point to, if anybody messages me while I'm streaming, I make a point to try to interact with them in some way, whether it's responding in the chat or giving them a shout out live while I'm playing, to let them feel special, let them feel included in what we're doing. And for me, that's what it's all about. It's not about, yeah, hey, I had 10 million, I had like 10K streamers like that. Cool, bro. You didn't say shit to them. You were just being a dick on stream.
Or talking to the friends that you were playing with and ignoring everyone else.
Exactly. And that bothers me. You had a moderator sitting there doing all the talking for you. There's something to be said about running a stream and having these viewers take the minute. It probably took them like a minute to sit there, work up the courage to message you in the first place. And then for you to completely ignore them or completely just downplay whatever they just said. It's degrading. And for me, that always bothered me, watching these streamers do that. And, I watched, to get the personality I have, I watched a lot of these other streamers, Dr. Disrespect, freaking, what's his face, Ninja, Slipgator, AJS News. And AJS News and Slipgator, they're always very good about responding to their viewers. Zul'jin Gaming, very good about responding to their viewers. But Ninja's a dick. PewDiePie's an asshole. They don't respond to their viewers. And when they do, it's usually a snide comment or something. And for me, that really, it kind of bothered me. And I was like, why are you doing that to these people who are literally putting bread on your table? And that was something that always bothered me about TV. And when I was working at ESPN, you'd get these massive egos coming in, acting like massive douchebags because they're on TV. And it's like, dude, without us, the techs, you would be nothing. Without the viewers, you would be nothing. Don't ever think you're above them. And that was the driving force for me doing these streams. And that was the driving force for me getting ETG back together. It's even in our contracts. Every streamer you guys see that go out on with the Enter the Gamer, the ETG actual tag, has to sign a contract that says that they will be pleasant to the community. They won't respond harshly to anybody. And if anybody messages them, they will respond to it, because we want you, the viewer, to be included.
Well, definitely don't think that it's not unnoticed, because it is, because there's a lot of people have come post streams, especially after the start of this new show that we did, The Game Interrupted, for example, like Abigail 13, she comes by the stream a lot, and the night that you took the time out to talk to her about Minecraft, and that was just a slight news topic that we had.
It was Minecraft being in, I remember very distinctly, my memory being shit as it is, there are distinct things I remember. I remember that one distinctly because we were talking about Minecraft being inducted into the Hall of Fame. And Minecraft is the start of ETG. So for me, that's very personal.
Right.
And, she was like, oh, yeah, I love Minecraft. And of course I'm going to take 5 seconds to talk to somebody about Minecraft. I mean, shit.
And she has, she mentioned, the point I was bringing up, she mentioned after stream that, she really appreciated the time that you took, just to have that conversation about something that she adores too, which is Minecraft. But we're kind of coming to the end of the interview now, and I got through a lot of the history side. I wanted to kind of build this timeline for people while also doing an interview with you of kind of how ETG is set up. So we're past, like our buddy Ken Jeong says, we are in the darkest timeline now with Corona, and we started Gamer Interrupted, and we started all these other things. What is now the future? What do you want to see for the
So
future from this
ETG
point on?
got huge a while back. At the beginning, like towards the end of last year, we had streams Wednesday, Thursday, Friday nights, and we were pulling close to a 20-hour week here
Hmm.
in the studios, and I was getting burnt out again, and I realized I needed to step away from it. So I stepped away from ETG for a little bit. I was dating this. I had this girlfriend that I needed to invest more time in, and that blew up in my face. But we're not going to go into that. But I stepped away from ETG, and that was one of the hardest things I ever had to do. And I don't think my ex realized how much how big of a deal that was that I stepped away from this thing that I had built and to make time for her and her kid and all that stuff. And, being a relationship, trying to be there for the two of them. And I don't think she gathered that, but that was when the company was we were kind of lost because I had developed this staff here in North Carolina, and when I stepped away from the company because I wasn't doing it, they all did too. So
Hmm.
all of our studio shows kind of stopped. All of the techs we used to have that would help run the shows walked away. So we didn't have a crew or a cast that we could do these shows with. So we went back to relying on streamers, and then our streamers became unreliable because there was nobody to hold them accountable.
Hmm.
So that's when we kind of dispersed again. And it wasn't with companies, it kind of goes in a parabolic motion. There's an up, there's a down. And with ETG, we've been in that kind of sinus rhythm for a while. And it wasn't until Corona started back up where I had left you basically as Gamer Actual for the time being. And after me and my ex broke up, I kind of stepped back in to take a look at, survey the scene, if you will. And ETG was kind of DOA at the time.
Hmm.
And it wasn't any fault for you guys. It was just there was no support coming in at any angle. And I was like, all right, so we have coronavirus going on right now. We can't really do anything. And again, I was at a very dark point in my life. I had just broken up with this person I had invested a lot of time into. Um, we only really dated for 3, 4 months, but for me, it felt like a lot more than that because I was looking long term and she wasn't. So I was kind of lost and I was trying to feel myself out. And then Corona happened and I couldn't go to the normal outlets I used to go to the game store and hang out, go to wander around the mall or something, go to a museum. I couldn't do my usual outlets and escape my own head. So I retreated to gaming. And then, you can only game for so long before you hit that wall and everything starts coming rushing back in. So that's when I discovered the Darkest Timeline. And I love Ken Jeong, love Joel McHale. The Community was one of my favorite shows when I was going through college and working at ESPN. And that's when I think I messaged you, and I think we have like ESPN or something, because I messaged you and told you, and you were like, "Dude, I was thinking the same exact thing," and that was the
And it was
birth.
because
Yeah,
I was having the same thing, listening to podcasts here for hours, while I'm in the room playing games, doing my homework, you know, turning on the Darkest Timeline, turning on any of the wrestling guys, and I was trying to learn. And then it was just like when you finally gave me that phone call was when we lit the fire under the both of us to kind of start Game Interrupted how it was.
and I, in my wildest dreams, I never thought it would become what it has become. And Gamer Interrupted has really morphed into its own beast, if you will. From just me and you talking to, I think, 1, 2 extra viewers besides us sitting in the freaking chat, to the 15, 16, 18 people who've been tuning in lately. it really has morphed into this its own entity, and I absolutely love it. And the fact that we're there for people like a Mandalorian or freaking what are their face Sono Kid and Scuba and all these other names that have been there for us at the time. You know, it's great that we can be there for them, and I love the community we've established, and that's really what Enter the Gamer is about. It's community. If you see it in our intro video, games, community, ETG actual.
Yep. Well, I think I've tried to hit all the nail on the head on, trying to find out who the man behind ETG is, Dan the man, and all the things like that, and really appreciate all of the timeline and breaking down some of the behind the scenes, something that you and I have always talked about past scenes, and
Yeah.
in the wrestling world, they refer to it as kayfabe, trying to keep what's real and what's not real, blur those lines.
Yeah.
And, for many years, we've done that literally until this point. We haven't, really broken into what the behind the scenes of ETG. So, that was really
we did have the Green Room series when we were doing Team Party Kill, where the public relations guy would walk around with the camera, and you'd get to see us kind of in our elements, getting ready for the game, all of us kind of goofing around. But again, I was still in character at the time. I was
Right.
Gamer Actual. I was the DM, So that was more of a candid look, but I would say this is the most honest that I've been with our viewing audience about who I am, what ETG's been, and where we've kind of come from.
Well, that my final, and I would say this is a bonus question because I think I would do a disservice to a lot of people, and I would have to shout out to Miranda Lorian for giving me these ideas, because he, one night on the couch, him and I watching something, he asked me off stream, he says, what is the driving force behind Dan? Why, besides the jokes, besides, the hatred towards, and I'm bringing up Star Wars now, and these are what the two topics that I wanted to save kind of as the bonus and towards the end. He wanted to know what is the beef, the real beef with Star Wars, with Kathleen Kennedy? What is the true story behind it?
So,
why do you take it so personally? Why did The Last Jedi affect you the way that it did?
So,
Why,
I've
for
said
people that come by the
Yeah.
stream, and they see you yelling and you see the
losing my
rants,
mind.
right? Beyond the character, what is the truth behind that?
So for me, and I've said it on our stream numerous times, is The Last Jedi was not a Star Wars movie. And I grew up reading, Star Wars has always been a outlet for me, and I grew up reading the Star Wars books. I grew up playing the Star Wars video games. I have Super Star Wars on my SNES, and it's one of the most played games. The first game I bought for my N64 was Shadows of the Empire. And I got so involved in the Young Jedi series, I got so involved in the Thrawn series growing up, that when you have this new canon come out and tell you everything you know is wrong, all those stories you grew up listening to, all those stories you loved, it's wrong. That's like a slap in a fan's face. That's like,
Would you say you took it personally?
very much so. I mean, we were there during the Phantom Menace, and I loved the prequels. As much shade as everybody gave them, I absolutely adored them. I loved the thought of, this kid from the backwoods planet coming up to becoming this great villain. You don't get stories like that. It's always, oh, he grows up to be a great hero. No, you get this tragic story about this hero who loses everything and becomes the greatest villain in the known galaxy. You get storytelling like that. Yeah, they made some bad executive decisions. Jar Jar Binks, the battle droids becoming more of a comedic outlet. The overdone special effects. But if you get to the brass tacks of it, it was still Star Wars. It was still that circular story of, the farm kid growing up to having this epic canon. And the nice thing with the prequels is there wasn't an established lore for that. None of that had been in place. So for them to do that, it was kind of nice. They changed Boba Fett's background, which pissed off a lot of fans. I get that. I like what they did with it. I think it gave the Clone Wars more personality. And then with the Clone Wars TV show, filling in those blank spots made it even better. But what Kathleen Kennedy did with the new canon and where she went wrong is you have J.J. Abrams, arguably a very good sci-fi persona who did wonders with the new Star Trek canon. Come up with The Force Awakens, which was a good Star Wars movie. I know a lot of people give it shit, but it was a great Star Wars movie. There are certain aspects of it I wish they would have changed, like, them destroying Starkiller Base. I think that would have made a great intro to the next movie. Yeah, they failed. Now how are they going to come back from that? They had this great build up to it. The thing that bothers me with the new canon is, had they had stayed the course with what J.J. Abrams had been building, it would have been a completely different series. It would have been a good Star Wars series. But instead, Kathleen Kennedy went and fired J.J. Abrams and went, I'm going to hire this other guy who Abrams had been sitting with Lucas going over the new canon that they were building, sitting with the original writers of the Star Wars canon, reaching out to the book writers and authors being like, hey, how would these characters react? Compiling the 3 script series and then handing it off to Rian Johnson, who looked at the script and went, no, and wrote his own. That's where I took it personally, is as a fan, I was betrayed.
Right. And it was an act of betrayal. It was.
What he did, and he claims to be a Star Wars fan, but he can't be, because none of the characters acted the way the characters did. It was like a bad fanfic. It was he had these characters acting in a way they normally wouldn't. He did things with the canon that didn't exist previously. And just gutted everything that was good and pure about Star Wars. And, turned it into a social justice narrative. And that's not what Star Wars is. Star Wars has been about strong female characters from the get-go. Star Wars has been about, archetypal heroes, the hero with 1,000 faces and all that. What he did is he turned everybody into an archetype. Poe Dameron, who is this Luke Skywalker, like being set up to be the next Wedge Antilles, Luke Skywalker type pilot type, turns into a misogynist douche in The Force Awakens, which we hadn't seen in the first one because that's not his character type. Finn goes back to being a coward after standing up for what he believed in the first movie.
Yeah.
Giving us one of the greatest fight scenes in the new canon, with him taking on Kylo Ren, a former stormtrooper with no force powers whatsoever, taking on a wannabe dark side force user. That alone for me stood out as one of the best moments in that movie. Is you have this character with no force powers being like, get some.
Yep.
That was Star Wars for me. Having Poe Dameron mansplain this Leia's plan was not Star Wars. Because that doesn't happen in Star Wars. Having them go on this long, drawn-out caper to this planet for no reason, just so they could be like, yes, it's all about equality and friendship and blah, blah, blah. That's not Star Wars. For them to sit there and The only good thing about that movie was Luke Skywalker.
Yep.
And they didn't even do him justice. So to have this canon of already established things, to have this lore that's already been built upon, and then just throw out the book and do your own thing with it, that hurt as a Star Wars fan, who had this idea of what the canon was. That hurt as somebody who watched Star Wars evolve as he grew up into something
it
it's
was
not.
beyond disappointment, is what you're saying.
Yeah, it was beyond disappointment. And I know I don't speak for all of the fandom when I go off on them. And I know there are people who do like what they did with the new Star Wars and can't stand the prequels and can't stand the original series, but this is the Star Wars for them. Homie, you're not a real Star Wars fan then.
Mm-hmm.
You are a fan of what's become Star Wars. And if you look at the Clone Wars TV series, if you look at Rebels, if you look at The Mandalorian, Dave Filoni and John Favreau have taken so much pains to fix the wrongs that have been done in the new movies. They have taken great pains to recreate this world. You know? If they had taken the new Star Wars canon and just completely omitted Luke Skywalker, completely omitted Leia, completely omitted Han Solo, I would have been perfectly fine with that. Look at Rogue One. Rogue One was perfect. It was the epitome of the perfect Star Wars movie. It was grittier. It was darker. It is what Star Wars should have become. But instead, they went this other way with it. And again, I have nothing against The Force Awakens, and I actually didn't hate Rise of the Skywalker. But the reason why Rise of the Skywalker was so panned was because they spent the first half of the movie getting rid of everything that went wrong in the second movie.
Catching you up on the problems, yeah.
And any
well, I hope
movie
that
series
clears
that has
some
to
of
do
the.
that just isn't worth its time. you know?
Well, I hope that clears some of the confusion and some of the gave a little bit insight into some of the fans that know your beef with Star Wars
Yeah.
and how we feel now. But my last question I have for you to
Yes.
wrap up the interview is where do you see yourself post military, and where do you see ETG after that point?
To quote one of my first classes from when I was in Corpus, whose name escapes me, never plan past your next duty station.
Okay.
Never plan past that because you don't know where you're going to be. Like I'm in Cherry Point right now, or not Cherry Point. I'm in Jacksonville right now. But if you had asked me 2 years ago, 3 years ago, I would have been like, yeah, I'm done after this. And I should have been out in July or in June, but here I am. July extended out for 4 more years because you don't know where you're going to be. So I try not to think out very far, but I can tell you this: what I would like to see is I would like ETG to become bigger. I want ETG to stick around. I want ETG to become a household name. I want it to just get popular enough so we can quit our day jobs and do that full time. But
Right.
I don't want it to be the next Netflix. I don't want it to be the next freaking DC universe. I don't want that. I want it to be a comfortable pair of Converse that only select people know about. It's like Tony Hawk. There are people who have no clue who that is. And then there are people who are like, oh my God, Tony Hawk, you're awesome. He's in that weird sort of fandom where people either know who he is or people don't. Voice actors are the same way. Matt Mercer, it's like, oh my God, that's Matt Mercer. But if you don't know who he is, And that's kind of what I would like, in the future is I want that kind of comfortable position where I can be like, yes, I'm Doc Shippey, and everybody go, hey, that's Doc Shippey. And then other people are like, I have no clue who that is, homie. But I want ETG to be there in like 10 years from now. And I want us to be doing this again 10 years from now, talking about how the last 10 years went and the trials and tribulations and all of our new streamers and all of our new shows and all that type of stuff. I want us to be Barstool Sports in 10 years. That's kind of where I see ETG. As for me, I have no fucking clue where I'm going to be in 10 years.
Well, I appreciate you sitting down with me tonight, and this is honestly one of the things I've always wanted to do in the journalism side. I've wanted to do, things like this, and I hope that now we have the podcast with people that listen to this special edition episode. You'll look forward to other interviews that we have from in the future. I want to also sit down with some other past ETG members at one point, if that's possible as well. So, Dan, if there's anything else that you'd like to mention tonight, this is all you. Let me know. But if not, those are all the questions that I have for you. In case you forgot, everyone, my name is AJ East Coast. But tonight I was not interviewing as the typical character that you know. And I hope that you got to see a little bit more of a real side for the both of us.
Well, I got nothing. Thank you for doing this, AJ. This was a lot of fun, and it's been nice reminiscing about everywhere we've come from. I mean, it's crazy to think of that this was literally just doodles on a scratch paper in the Vitals room back 4 years ago, and now it's become a podcast and a web stream and a website, and it's become something more than what I could have ever hoped it to be. So I thank you for that, for sticking with it and dealing with me at my best and worst. And if I could address the fans, I gotta thank you guys for being with us through this entire ride. If you're new to ETG, welcome, and thank you for being awesome and tuning into us. And if you're some of our old favorites, again, thanks for sticking with us. And we try to keep it going for you guys, and you're the only reason why I do it. So thanks again.
All right, everyone. Thank you for coming to Behind the Gamer Tags. Have a good night.
Bye.